The Rings of Power is a Prime exclusive television show based on the works of Tolkien. You know, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, Middle-earth, all that nerdy stuff. The plot of the show is basically, imagine that really cool opening narration in the first film about how Sauron originally rose to power, but spread across a whole high-budget television show. The show's second season just finished. I'm actually yet to watch the final episode. I think it comes out tomorrow. I'm really excited. I really like the show. I enjoy watching it with my friends. Oh, but the discourse around the show? No, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to ruin the vibe. I don't think you want to know about that. No, I don't want to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
This is a dismal, dreary, absolutely incompetent show.
This show is quite simply an abomination.
By far the worst episode of the worst television adaptation of all time.
Everything about it was terrible. Galadriel was terrible. Elrond was terrible. Celebrimbor was horrific.
Now a bit of backstory. I absolutely loved the original Peter Jackson films growing up. I still love them. It could be argued that the behind the scenes footage of those films is the original thing that sparked my interest in filmmaking, because they were so well made. Now, when it was announced that Amazon had got the rights to make a Lord of the Rings show, I thought, here we go, another intellectual property being churned through the meat grinder of the industry, thanks for ruining my childhood, Jeff Bezos. But no, honestly, the first time that I watched the show, I actually sat down and watched it in 2022, I was pleasantly surprised. I was surprised about how much I enjoyed it and how much escapist whimsy I felt. I was texting my friends like, wait, hold on, why did I enjoy that? Why was that good? Why do I feel good about this right now? This was supposed to be bad. The Rings of Power at a time for me was one of the only few things that I could enjoy that I had literally no idea what people were saying on Twitter about it. I was free from the discourse brain for a while. I was just at peace watching the show and going like, wow, look how amazing the Kingdom of Khazad-dûm looks, wow. I knew that at some point there was going to be hate because, well, Lord of the Rings fans are weird. Trust me, by the end of this video, you will understand what I'm talking about. I was surprised to see the extent that people make it out to seem that this show is the worst thing to ever happen in fantasy, and you might as well burn all the books because this is just an insult to Tolkien and it's horrible. I hate it. The truth of the matter is, we have come to a point where discourse owns television now, and the way that people criticize media has become increasingly aggressive.
Shovel your dog shit, fucking crap ideology into every...
The source material that this show is based on is Tinsy Wincy. It's really small. If it were an animal, it would be Stuart Little because it's just so small. The show is mostly based off of the appendices at the back of The Return of the King. The show goes over the story of the rings that Sauron, the main antagonist, made to enslave all of Middle-earth, and gets to a point where he's really evil and he's hitting everyone, and the Isildur goes, no, and then he chops off Sauron's hand, and then Sauron goes, bah! And then Isildur goes, a ring, and then Elrond goes, oh, cast it in the fire, and then Isildur goes, no, it's mine. You know, I'm realising now that I sound a bit like a nerd, and I'm here to live my truth. I am a nerd.
Yes, I am a nerd.
Yes, I am a nerd. Bookworm, I'm studious.
The show is a slow burn showing Sauron's rise to power and the eventual collapse of peace in Middle-earth. Some characters in the show being ones that we are already familiar with from the Jackson films, such as Galadriel, Isildur, Elrond, and Gandalf, maybe. We don't know, but most likely. And I want to be clear that in defending the show, I'm not saying that the show is perfect, okay? No. Not by a long shot. No, the show's not perfect. Every show has its problems, and every fan of that show can easily look past those problems because at the end of the day, they're not really that big of a deal. Anyway, to prove that I don't think that this show is perfect, here's a list of things that I actually don't like about the show. The elf haircuts are not giving me elf vibes enough. Like, Elrond looks like Casey Neistat. Can we give him some luscious locks, please? Can we give him some units? I find the character of Theo to be really annoying. I don't like that character. I don't like his stupid look. He looks annoying. He keeps saying, mother, mother.
You ready?
Yes, mother.
Shut up, Theo. Shut up. Shut up! I find the casting of Lenny Henry as one of the Hobbits kind of distracting because every time I look at Lenny Henry, I kind of think about the Premier Inn adverts. There is some really weird social commentary in the first season where it talks about elves stealing people's jobs, kind of like a Trump thing, I guess. Elf workers stealing our jobs. And the recent kiss between Elrond and Galadriel, I think was cringe, I think it was unneeded, I think it was undeserved. I don't like it. And it goes against my personal headcanon that Elrond is Galadriel's gay best friend. Now this show, from the perspective of like culture war stuff, kind of falls into a really hard place because Tolkien fans, they really like tradition, they like things to be done the same way, and they treat Tolkien's work sometimes with a kind of biblical level of sanctity and reverence. They think that this professor from World War II is the Messiah. And also the show does a lot of things differently. Some people call it woke, and it's all being done in the name of a big company, so I understand why people want to tear it down, because they're treating this show like it's a symbol of the woke agenda. When you look up this show on YouTube, your recommended videos where it's like
flop, idiot fantasy,
Bored of the Rings,
ultimate insult to Tolkien, pathetic, WTF, duh, Greta Thunberg Galadriel.
Most of this content really is the same. It's very aggressive, it's very hyperbolic. A lot of the criticism boils down to pointing out when a character does a dumb thing and then shouting about it and saying, oh, this show is so stupid, it's such bad writing, why is it written like this? I wouldn't do it like that. Why are characters doing actions like this? And that is a criticism that I see all the time, and I think it's really stupid. Like, imagine saying, oh, why is Romeo doing that? Can he not see that Juliet is still alive? The plot hole, Shakespeare is bad at writing characters because they all make dumb decisions. Characters have flaws so that there is tension in the narrative. I don't know what to tell you. This is Cinema Sins level criticism. The rest of the runtime for these kinds of videos are taken up by complaining about wokeness and the idea of go woke, go broke. One of my favourite criticisms of the Rings of Power is from heel versus babyface. Let's give it a watch.
And there is one particular moment where the camera pans and shows the DEI screen of the elves. And I'm like, who the f are these people? Are these elves? No. Oh, you're just scared of black people or brown people? No. Every race in this show feels identical. It doesn't feel like there's Numenorians and elves and Harfoots and humans. It feels like there's a bunch of dumb Californians who've gone through the DIE tick box quest to get themselves onto the goddamn show.
Imagine getting this angry about one shot from a television show, a fantasy television show. It's not real. It's fantasy. It's a fantasy television show. If you are unfamiliar with this man, he is genuinely most famous for his Bethesda Starfield pronoun selection screen rant, which honestly belongs in the Criterion collection.
Fuck your immersion. Fuck you having a good time. Fuck you falling into a world and just getting lost. No, no, no! Current f***ing day! Sorry, did you want to get immersed in our world? Yeah, well, guess what? F***ing pronouns! F***ing gender ambiguity! You take everything we love, all our immersions, all our fantasies, all our escapism, and you just can't help shovel your dog shit, fucking crap ideology into
If you get this angry about something on the internet, I think you should be legally required to explain to your family what it is you're so angry about. Son, what you're so angry about? I saw a video of you shouting at the screen. Yeah, Mum, basically, right, have you heard of Starfield? No. Well, basically, it's a video game, and in the video game, there was a pronoun screen. Right. Mum, do you not get it? There was a pronoun screen, Mum. Right. Okay. Mum, do you not get it? A lot of the other videos that you see on the Rings of Power are from this one man called the Critical Drinker.
Everything that was bad in season 1 is somehow even worse here. There's all the usual tropes like the girl bosses who fight and strategize right alongside the men as if that's normal procedure, the modern metropolitan diversity projected hilariously onto northern European medieval cultures that totally don't support it, the cheap looking sets, and the actors who look like they're allergic to testosterone, but that's just what we expect from modern Hollywoods.
It's obvious to me that the Critical Drinker is just a grifter, the type of person to angrily tweet about the fact that there's a black woman in the Minecraft movie, or that the class of younglings in the Acolyte is too woke. Oh my god, he actually spent time individually labeling the race and gender of all of these children in this one shot. Like, what is this? There's a whole video that the Critical Drinker did on the Spider-Verse movies where he claims that they purposely make Peter Parker look like a bad father because he's the only straight white man in the movie.
I can't shake the feeling that the script is doing everything in its power to play down Peter Parker. The first movie portrayed him as an aging, burned out loser who only redeems himself at the end, while the second film morphs him into a bumbling, hapless father in a pink bathrobe who for some reason keeps taking his baby along on life-threatening adventures. Is this some weird attempt to mock and belittle the Spider-Man that most people know and love, who incidentally just happens to be the only straight white man in the entire movie? I don't know, man, it just kind of leaves a sour taste in my mouth, that's all.
There is so much stupidity in that one clip that I honestly can't even do it justice. I can't even begin to explain how stupid that is. Like, what is he talking about? And like, he's not made to look like a bad father? What is this criticism? Is this your job? Is this your job, making videos like this? There is a video that goes deeper into the reasons Critical Drinker is a grifter from this channel called The Birdman. I think it's a really good video. I really can't stand to watch this man's videos because it's so obvious to me that he's putting on a voice. He puts on this voice of, oh my god, like this is the worst thing I've ever watched, ever. Oh my god. You don't need to talk like that. You don't need to. I can't even bear to stand it. It's the worst thing I've ever watched. It's horrible. Also, I understand that the Critical Drinker is a character. Like, obviously this man doesn't go around his daily life talking like this. But really, him having a character like this is just a crutch for him to have really surface level, nonsensical criticism. You can say really dumb things about Across the Spider-Verse, but deflect and say, oh, it's a drunken character, it's fine. Honestly, can people stop trying to do the Mr. Plinkett Red Letter Media thing? Like, it's not as funny when you try to do it. And Mr. Plinkett actually had good criticism, so can we stop trying to do that, please?
Star Wars The Phantom Menace was the most disappointing thing since my son.
Also, somehow the Critical Drinker has got to a point where he is on Piers Morgan, he's on podcasts, he's sat with Ben Shapiro. It really shows that you don't have to have genuine criticism to get into these spaces. Like at one point in one of his Rings of Power videos, the Critical Drinker makes a point saying that flashbacks are unnecessary and bad writing, apparently.
The show gets off to the worst possible start by devoting a good 20 minutes to an extended flashback sequence explaining how Sauron got betrayed by his own lieutenant and eventually got reborn as Halbrand before running into Galadriel. Why are you wasting all this time by telling us stuff that we already know? Do you guys even understand what storytelling is?
The flashback sequence at the beginning of season 2 was there to provide context and extra information that builds on the themes of the whole series. It sets up the themes of the series. If we didn't have the flashback, we would understand the character a lot less. The whole season revolves around Sauron trying to regain power, so it makes sense to show us how he originally lost that power. I don't really understand what the people making hate videos about the Rings of Power actually want. I think whatever the show did, they would hate it regardless because, well, it's their job to hate things. This kind of discourse has infected the internet. I just hate this kind of media criticism where it's angry, it's nostalgic, it's defensive, it's nonsensical. Like, the Rings of Power is not a woke version of the Peter Jackson films. It's a spiritual successor which understands Tolkien from a thematic sense and also does things with a more modern approach. Like, do you want this to be a rehash of the old Peter Jackson films? Because I don't want that. If we constantly compare the Rings of Power to the Jackson trilogy, there's only so long before we start going down the nostalgia bait way of things, which I'm sad to inform you has already started with the new Hunt for Gollum film, where Andy Serkis says he wants to embrace AI. Ian McKellen, run away. Run as far as you can from the set of that film. Don't look back. I know you're getting old, but you have to run. Again, a lot of the criticism in these videos just boils down to, well, this didn't happen in the source material. This isn't 100% canonical to the book, so therefore it's bad. Again, Tolkien fans are weird sometimes with the way that they have black and white thinking about source material. It's strange behavior.
Celebrimbor, who canonically should be in Eregion, gives Galadriel, who canonically should not be in Eregion, the 9 rings for men, which canonically Galadriel never touched, to keep them from Sauron, who canonically shouldn't be an Eregion.
All the things that he is complaining about make sense if you actually watch the show, but for some reason it's bad because it's not in the canon. You know what else isn't canonical in the book? The fact that not everyone in the show is white. And Tolkien fans, some Tolkien fans, had a problem with this at the time. The abuse and harassment of the cast and general spreading of online hate got so bad that the production team originally had to put out a statement standing up for themselves and making it clear, if you don't like this cast, this is not the show for you. Underneath the tweet, you of course had normal people leaving normal, supportive comments, and then you had
Tolkien created a world with distinct ethnic groups in a setting where the mixing of those groups was very uncommon, particularly in the regions covered by most of the narrative. If you didn't want that, why did you choose it as a source material?
stop being weird, be normal. Be normal. Also at the time, I remember seeing a really strange opinion that, well, the dwarves, they wouldn't have been black because they live underground. So therefore, they wouldn't have evolved to have melanin in their skin. It's a fantasy show. There are worse tweets than the one that I read, like a lot worse. If you go to the hidden replies of the original season 1 promotion, it's just wall-to-wall racism. Probably the most amount of racism I've ever seen under one tweet. It's really horrible. Not only would I be demonetized if I show these tweets, but if I show these tweets, that's exactly what these people want. So I'm not going to do it justice.
Especially fans of colour, who are themselves being attacked simply for existing in this fandom. Where are your receipts? Where? Oh, I'm the first dwarf of colour. Oh, I'm the first elf of colour. Ideology. It's for you and me, apart from it divides us all, you see.
I touched a little bit on this in my video on the Gnomes vs Knights trend, which is a video that didn't get enough love from the algorithm. I worked really hard in that video. In that video, I briefly touched on the fact that a lot of Tolkien fans start to slide into right-wing ideology pretty quickly. And I don't think that there is a clearer example of this than the Rings of Power. But to be fair to the people critiquing the show, this is the worst of the criticism. A lot of the criticism of this show that I hear is thankfully not all weird racism. A critique that I hear all the time about the show is a critique about the portrayal of the character of Galadriel and how she's too much of a girl boss, and apparently in the books she's supposed to be 6 foot tall or something. There is one video that I've seen that I think is just really funny.
First thing that I don't see is I don't see Galadriel's radiant hair. In Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, she is almost always portrayed with some sort of lighting to ensure that she seems to have radiant hair. Next up is this eye level and head level filming. Doesn't give us a sense of her height. This just doesn't look like Galadriel to me. This is actually a better photo. The sun behind Galadriel, we see her radiant hair, and we do have a shot from below, but it could be even more if they had simply made the people on the right look a little bit shorter. They really should have spent more time shooting from this angle. Again, I think they're onto the right track here. They've got a camera below, but most of all, they have these horrible horizontal lines on her outfit, which give us a sense of shortness. This is actually working against her.
I don't care if it was written in the book that Galadriel is the tallest elf. I just don't care. Just like how I don't care that Hermione is supposed to have large teeth in the Harry Potter books. Sometimes when you adapt things have to change because they make less sense in a visual medium. And this slideshow of like all the shots of Galadriel is just such strange behaviour. Tolkien was just an old professor, you know, sat under a tree thinking, ah yes, Galadriel, hair as radiant as the Valar. She stood tall, yes. Stood tall, taller than any elf that come before. Yes, that's right, yes. That'll look good in my book. Cut to modern day where these guys are like, actually, Galadriel's supposed to be the tallest elf in all of Elfendom. That's what it said, that's what Tolkien wrote down. That's what he wrote down in the book, pal. If you don't like it, here's what it says in the book. In the Rings of Power, Galadriel was basically the main character, and I understand why they changed the height, because I imagine the whole show she's just towering over everyone. The whole thing. It would be very distracting. Having Galadriel as a more human, more relatable, less scary character also gets us invested in her character arc, because knowing that this is eventually what Galadriel becomes, we get invested in how she becomes that. I'm watching the show because I want to know how Galadriel gets to that point. A lot of the critiques about Galadriel just fall into this complaining about woke stuff again. People say that Galadriel is too much of an overproduced cliche of a girl boss. Apparently, maybe you just aren't paying attention to her actual character arc. Pointing at something on the screen and going, oh, it's a cliche, it's a cliche, is a very lazy way of critiquing a show. You could do that with anything. Oh, he betrayed his friends, that's a cliche, that's a cliche. Not every female character who wields a sword in a show is automatically a girl boss. Also, it doesn't really look good when you have the same criticism about a show as Elon Musk. Almost every male character so far is a coward, a jerk, or both. Only Galadriel is brave, smart, and nice. The amount of cynicism that this show receives is just insane. Rings of Power haters start frothing at the mouth as soon as a female character picks up a sword because they're sure it symbolizes the Hollywood elite woke agenda of girl bosses in media. Maybe it's the fact that these guys are watching the show alone, so they're left with all the negative thoughts in their head. You know, I watched this show with some friends and it was lovely. It was a great experience. I think they'd enjoy the show a lot more if they watched the show with friends. Like, I watched the show with a big fat nerd and they know exactly who they are. They're watching this. You know who you are. There is one quite short video from this channel, The Art of Storytelling, which I think is a fairer look into why he personally does not like the show. He explains how he thinks that some questions that readers have when reading Tolkien, like, I wonder what this creature might look like, or wonder what this battle that's named in the book looks like, are questions that should really be left unanswered, because according to him, it takes away from the story, takes away from the impact of Tolkien's original writing.
At the heart of Rings of Power storytelling is a particular kind of fallacy, one that I fear is all too common, and that is the assumption that fans want unexplored things to be explored.
I agree to an extent. I think a lot of things like Star Wars and Marvel rely very heavily on answering questions, fan questions, and taking too much from the source material, and it starts becoming fan service. I think that's a thing that happens, but at some point being against fan service and adding imagery to source material does just become being against fun. And the Lord of the Rings books are hard to read, I'm not gonna lie. I've tried so many times to read this old copy I have. The text is so small, the prose is hard to read. Anyway, Art of Storytelling also complains in his video about there's one creature in the Rings of Power and he complains about how it's too shallow in the ground.
Now, incidentally, one of these nameless things makes an appearance in Rings of Power, and the show gets it wrong in two important ways. First, this creature is not deep underground, so it doesn't even make sense. And second, Arondir easily kills it and then delivers a cheesy one-liner about eating it for supper. Awesome. No imagination necessary.
This tiny piece of information that this creature is actually supposed to be deeper in the ground is not taking me out of the story. It's just not. It's not taking most people out of the story. Also, making a point to say that a joke about eating a creature for supper is bad humor is very ironic when you think about all the jokes that they made in the original Jackson trilogy. There's so many jokes about eating food. Oh, what about second breakfast?
Potatoes. Boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
If the Peter Jackson films came out now, there would be discourse like, why is Arwen such a big character when she's not in the source material? Woke, Marvel-level humor about second breakfast, ruining the drama of the series? Cringe. Recently, the hatred around the show has lifted slightly as the most recent episodes revolving around a big battle as Sauron ranks the rings in Eregion were deemed to be pretty good, actually. Even in the eyes of the most cynical people. There's headlines like, after 2 seasons, I think we were wrong about the Rings of Power. The Rings of Power backlash may have been too hasty. Lord of the Rings fans were too quick to condemn the Rings of Power. No, really? You don't say. Fans of the show were obviously very annoyed by this U-turn in opinion. You know, after they've had to endure 2 years of just absolute toxic, racist, just horrible, like all the most horrible stuff, and then you come back and say, we may have been a bit too hasty. One tweet reads, so now that the think pieces about how maybe the hate campaign against the Rings of Power was hasty are coming out, can we talk about how media outlets have contributed and fanned the flames of that hate campaign? Even this piece doesn't mention the racism and misogyny the backlash was made of. And it's true, a lot of this culture war nonsense has bled through into the wider conversation about this show. It's just rough how content like this can be spread into bigger articles and then the public read it and go, God, this show must be horrible. It's not that horrible. The people that hate it just have no lives. There's a load of Forbes articles that are written by the same man, and I just fundamentally disagree with a lot of what they say. The Rings of Power Season 2 premiere review, a dreadful, jumbled mockery of Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. I have somehow made it through the first 3 episodes of the Rings of Power Season 2 on Prime Video. Though the show's sophomore effort did not make this either pleasant or easy for me, the trappings of a decent epic fantasy are here. It looks good, except when it looks like a movie set. It sounds very nice, though the score is not particularly memorable, but that's about it. Are we watching the same show? Because I don't think we are. You know, all my friends, we're blaring out the Rings of Power soundtrack like there's no tomorrow. I don't feel as bad about this because it's a Forbes article, and anyone can write for Forbes because they're desperate for advertising, so they let anyone write on there, so there's room for everybody. Again, there is a fan base out there for this show. I have seen it. I have seen fan art, I have seen shipping, I have seen fan edits of Disa the Dwarf with music from Chapel Roan. With today's media landscape, a lot of shows only really get true appreciation after the years of discourse and criticism have washed over it like a wave. With people constantly giving their commentary about very small aspects of the show, such as Galadriel's height or how deep this one creature can burrow into the ground, I think we've just forgotten how to normally interact with TV. You know, not every problem with the show has to be angry discourse. People complain a lot about the death of fantasy television and how after Game of Thrones it's not the same anymore, but then the most vocal majority of the audience are the ones who scrutinise and criticise every aspect of the show until it's not fun anymore. This is not how normal people are supposed to watch television. Also, as I'm working on this video, it's been reported that studios are assembling superfan focus groups to assess various materials for a franchise project to avoid social media backlash. Superfans do not represent general audiences. When I think about a superfan focus group, it's just going to be a group of people like this, isn't it? These people sit in their rooms all day, you know, with their action figures around them, complaining about the woke agenda and how boring the show is. So many of these channels, before they start a review of the Rings of Power, say, oh, this show is so boring. If the show is so boring, why do you have so many hours of content dedicated to it? Because this culture war nonsense is what makes you money, and now you can't escape. You have to angrily review every episode of the Rings of Power, because that's your job. They say Tolkien is rolling in his grave because this show is so bad, and no, honestly, I think if Tolkien is rolling in his grave, it's because of these thumbnails. These are the same people who got The Acolyte cancelled, the same people who scream about pronouns, and the same people who got triggered by a drag queen in Doctor Who. And they complain about all television not being as good as it was in the past. And I hate to break it to you, but the reason that you don't like this show isn't the woke agenda, it's because you have spent so much time on Twitter that your inner child is dead. You can't watch a show normally anymore. Please, people, please just be normal, okay? It served me very well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe, or maybe you can look into becoming a member for the channel. If you become a member, you can get exclusive videos. You can have your name in the credits. Okay, have a nice day. I'm gonna go eat some banana bread. See you in the next video.
Take